Welcome to the Understanding Boys podcast. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is recorded, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to their leaders past, present and emerging. The Understanding Boys podcast is a series of conversations exploring what it is to be a good man these days. And if you had a story that you could tell a boy of, say, 14 and he'd listen, what would that story be? And that's really what I'm asking our guests today. I'm Dr. Ray Swan, and we're a community of teachers and parents concerned with the education and growth of boys and young men in the modern world. This series is brought to you by Brighton Grammar, an all-boys school in Melbourne. To learn more about the podcast, please visit understandingboys.com.au. In the podcast today, we speak with Emma Murray. Emma's probably one of the best mindfulness coaches and mindset coaches in Australia at the moment. She's known for working with top AFL teams and elite Australian athletes. Her work has been featured across multiple platforms, many people singing the praises of the life-changing experiences that they've had working with Emma. Emma's now working with school children, looking at how the way in which you think about things can really affect your performance. And in our conversation today, we talk about her own story, about being a mum, some of the challenges that she's faced, and then ultimately some of the things that we can gain by thinking about not only who we are, but how we think about who we are. So welcome, Emma Murray, to the Understanding Boys podcast. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me here.
So I thought a great place to get started actually is, what are you doing right now in life and work? I know you've had a lot of involvement, different sporting clubs and working with kids in, high performance mindfulness. How are things shaping up for you with, with COVID, lockdowns and kids at home and the whole catastrophe? How is life meeting Emma Murray right now?
I feel like actually yesterday and today is the first time I've lifted my head and taken a breath, because on the weekend, the Swifts netball team that I'm working with as a high performance mind coach, they won the grand final. So that was tick, get that done. The AFL season finished the week before. That wasn't as great for Richmond, but still just as busy. And of course, we had the Olympics this year, and that was a lot of work and has been a big body of work. So to tick those things off was great. And of course, throughout all of that, I've been working on putting my methodology, my high performance mindfulness process and learnings and teachings into an online program for students and athletes and corporate executives. So on top of that, we have 4 children, and, they're in lockdown and we're in lockdown with them. And, we're fortunate they're at great schools. Our youngest just moved across to Brighton Grammar this year, and that was a godsend, because online learning with him has been fantastic. So, yeah, we're doing okay. We're busy, but okay. So it's been a big year, and I'm happy to take a breath today. Anyway,
that sounds like an extraordinary year. And, I guess as we think about it, and I was talking to a few parents over the last few days, just the in and out and the not knowing this year. I mean, I think last year with where COVID was and the alpha strain, and, we kind of had this horizon. And at the moment, it's difficult to get a sense of where the next horizon's going to be. And we're looking around, I think, we're talking down in Melbourne, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. And, we're looking across the country, and there's different states at different levels with COVID. And we're thinking, well, where's the leadership and what does it look like? And how do we start to frame that? I'm really interested in your thoughts, as a mum, with kids at home. How do you start to frame up, what this all means? How are you maintaining that sort of sense of optimism, and what are some of the insights that you're unpacking? Because I'm sure as much as, in the professional sense, when you get to be Emma and the professional coaching and high performance mindfulness, athletes are expecting things of you, but then your kids, they probably see you a little bit differently, perhaps. How do you kind of manage all that?
Well, for our family, I guess we had a dress rehearsal when Will broke his neck when he was going into year 8 and sustained a spinal cord injury. leaving him quadriplegic, that for us, that was a dress rehearsal. That was complete change, uncertainty. It was isolation. It was our life went from, being at Saturday sport and Will going off to this activity and that school camp and meeting with school parents. It went down to, us being either in a hospital or a home and not just supporting Will through that, but also supporting 3 other kids whose life all of a sudden was put on hold. Their Saturday sport, their support with homework and parties and everything that they wanted to do all of a sudden was secondary to Will. So they became very isolated as well. And what I learnt through that was if the captain of the ship is okay, everyone else is okay, and they will follow your lead. And so they will not only follow your lead in terms of the routine you set, but the emotional state that you lead in as well. They will just pick that up and run with that. And so what spinal cord injury taught us and what we've carried into lockdown is that we just look at what we can do. We try and bolster our ability to dig into our strengths as opposed to, well, it will be finished here. And, when we get out there, it's like, well, you know what, we can do hard things. We've done hard things with Will before and we're okay. We've done hard things. We had to move up north last year and we survived that. So it's really drilling into our resilience in the situation as opposed to focusing on when's the situation going to change and why aren't they doing this. And, in spinal cord injury, there are no answers, there are no solutions, there are no cures. And so you have to be okay with it not getting better in a way. And so you have no choice but to really focus on what we can do and our strengths. And we had a mantra after Will's injury in our family that we can do hard things. And we used to joke about it, some things happened that got so tough and so ridiculous, like you couldn't script how tough they were for our family. And we'd sort of nearly have a laugh and say, well, we can do hard things. Look at what we've conquered this week. And so carrying that into lockdown has been just natural for us, I guess.
I think the thing that really springs to mind is just bravery, like to hear you say that and to be able to step into, qualities of resilience and knowing, talking about the importance of routine and being the captain, the leader and the emotional state. I imagine still there would be times where there was a sense of things being overwhelming, and, feeling lost, to continue the captain at sea metaphor, when the storm's coming and it feels like there's no ending. I mean, what are some of the things that people can go to, based on your experience in those times?
Yeah, I mean, you use words there like bravery and overwhelm and leadership. And, for some people listening, they're like, well, that's okay for you. You teach that stuff. You know how to do that stuff. I don't know how to do that. And it becomes a lot of it is around where we place our focus. Bravery is not a thing that's either in you or not in you. It's like where you choose to focus. And, if you focus on one very small thing you can do, that might appear brave to someone else, but it's just picking up your focus from the stuff that's not helping you, from the, media and from the poor leadership. And it's picking up your focus and going, I'm choosing today to conquer this and to do this. And one of the tools as part of our high performance mindfulness online program, whether it's for students or execs or athletes, we have a section on overwhelm because you actually need to take action when you're in overwhelm. Everyone knows that, but it's like, what action do I take? And we have a tool called chunking down, which is about picking up your focus. When you've got big overwhelm, now in lockdown, that shows up differently. For some people, big overwhelm is big anxiety, big procrastination, big lack of motivation, big anger. It shows up differently for all of us. But when you have that big stuff, then we talk about breaking overwhelm by taking it down to very small actions. So when you've got big feels, you want to have a small focus. And so, for me, I set very small targets in my day. My day is at the moment, my target is to, it sounds ridiculous, start each day with 2 cups of, water and lemon juice. And I don't drink tea or coffee, so it's a cup of bone broth for me. Now, that seems ridiculous, but I know I can tick that off. And I know then I can go into my day starting with a tick, rather than starting with, I've got so much to do, I don't know where to start, and procrastinating on morning and putting off your exercise. But if I set the task to get up and do a 5K run and have a green smoothie and meditate before online school starts, I'm going to start my day with a cross. I'm going to start my day with a fail, and it's going to set me up to be in that mindset. So it's like, bravery, beating overwhelm, being a great leader is just about taking small, achievable actions. But we don't do that because we feel like when we need a big change that we've got to take big action. So we just sit in inertia and don't do anything.
Yeah, it's powerful. And, I guess where I'm, being challenged in this is thinking about the stories that go with that, because of course, we think about adversary and how do we call the troops? And again, the language I'm using right now, I'm very conscious of is part of that, I guess, cultural dialogue about when we're in a challenge, we need something special to happen. We need this, this golden key or this magic beans or these other things to appear. But it actually might just be, as you were saying, when you got big feels, you're taking small actions. And I was reminded as well of, I think is it McRaven's thing on the, if you want to start your day, just make your bed is the first thing to do. It's a win. At least if you have a terrible day, you end up in a bed, you've got a nice bed to come back to.
Yeah. Put your feet on the floor and just take 3 breaths. We have to, we could talk about this all day, but what I want people to know is that we are wired purely for survival. We're wired to stay alive. So we're going through our day hypervigilant to potential threats. We all do it, not just in lockdown, but any time, no matter who we are. And our focus is wired to go to the bad and the dangerous. Now, that bad and dangerous shows up in failure. Like, what if I fail? What if I get this wrong? What if I can't, get this mark, or I'm, don't get this promotion? So it comes up really focusing on, potential failure, or focusing on the failure we've just had. Why did I say that? If only I'd done this, if only I'd kicked that goal. It shows up in that fear of other people's opinions. What do they think? And what are they saying of me? And, what do my parents think? And what do my teachers think? And my bosses think? And it shows up in this obsessive focus on outcomes, constantly looking at the numbers, right? So we are constantly looking at the target and am I there and what do I need? And so when our focus is stuck on this stuff, we are going into this survival mode. And this survival mode does not help us thrive. It helps us survive, but doesn't help us thrive. And I think this was the thing that, knowing this going into spinal cord injury, gave me an absolute advantage, because I knew my mind was going to want to take me all the time to, what if Will dies? What if we go broke? What if, we're caring for him for the rest of our life? I knew that. So it was about recognizing that and continually picking up my focus and putting it on, what can I do, rather than the threats of what's not working. And I want people to truly understand that when they wake up in the morning, their eyes open, and particularly in lockdown, particularly in the situation we're in at the moment, it's immediately going to that threat. So we start our day in looking for the bad, looking for the danger, looking for the things we've done wrong yesterday, the things that could go wrong today. We're looking for the fatigue. We're looking for the stress. And so if we don't insert a circuit breaker into that, and that might be making your bed so you can go, that's a good thing. That's not a threat. I'm in control. I know what I'm doing. If it's putting your feet on the floor and breathing, because, lots of breath work turns that survival mechanism off. If it's drinking your hot water and lemon so you feel like you're controlling and you're getting a win for the day, we have to deliberately break that stress cycle. Otherwise, we sit in a stress cycle all day, every day. And that is where the fatigue is coming from COVID. And I believe in trauma situations like spinal cord injury, or people who someone in the family has cancer, the fatigue is constantly sitting in the stress. Actually, funnily, Will, on the weekend, he said, Mum, I'm just cooked. Like he's not seeing friends, which is a big energy in for Will. He's training really hard. He's doing some work in recruitment at Richmond, and it's a busy time of year. So he was really cooked. And I said to him, okay, well, you need to take a couple of days off everything. But the most important thing I said to him, and this is what I want people to know, is I said, don't spend those 2 days in bed, watching movies. That is not good energy in. I said, spend those 2 days actually deliberately, purposefully doing some things that bring you joy. Because it's those things that bring us joy that stop that stress response. Sitting on the couch longer does not stop that stress response. Watching more Netflix, if you're still worrying about what you've said and what you've done, is not stopping that stress response. And we have to acknowledge what stops our stress response, our golf games, dinner with the family, those things have been interrupted. So we've got to find different ways. And that might be putting your feet on the floor and taking a breath.
Great. So there's 3 things in a way that you've covered there. So one is about a circuit breaker and having circuit breakers every day. And, you've shared a few of those. So I'm thinking again, if I was a parent listening to this, I could be thinking around, okay, so what are some great circuit breakers I can use during the day? Would you then build those into some sort of routines in the day? Does that also sort of support this way of being?
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of the program, we teach a very simple breath routine, which is called Take 5, which is I breathe in for 5, I hold for 5, and I breathe out for 5. And when I breathe out, I really soften my face and I soften my shoulders. And you repeat that 5 times. Now, that only takes a couple of minutes. And I talk about doing that when you wake up, doing that before every meal, because we're just eating meals at our desk or helping a kid, and we are constantly feeling like not great because we're eating in that survival mode. When you sit down at your desk to start the day, when you close your laptop at the end of the day. So if you think of it like how you would punctuate a sentence, you would start a sentence with a capital letter and you'd have a few commas and a full stop at the end. We should be thinking about that with our day, with little circuit breakers, so that we break that stress response, because we cannot be in that running away from the tiger and resting and recovering in the cave. We can't be in both modes at the same time.
There's a couple of great stories. So we got a couple of good little metaphors. That's fantastic. And I love the idea of punctuation because it's I think that even works from a mindset idea where you're just kind of ruminating, and you can run laps in your mind about, oh, what if, and there's no punctuation in that, in the inner critic, is there? The inner critic just kind of rolls. He doesn't, he or she doesn't take breath sometimes actually. So actually having these routines are supported by circuit breakers that actually provide a punctuation is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, no, it doesn't break. People say, oh, I can't sleep. It's like, yeah, because, if you were a caveman fighting 10 tigers and had 3 snipers in the tree, you're not going to go to sleep. And you're right. Your mind is just replaying everything that you didn't get done during the day, or the wrong, silly things you said, or what you could have done better. And it's also looking forward into the next day. And we try and get in a conversation with ourselves. We try and throw positive thinking at it, that I can do it. And it's understanding that I'm just in the stress cycle and I need to stop the stress cycle. And I need to know how to do that. So that is with breath. It is with picking up our attention and focusing on what we can do. It is picking up our attention and focusing on what I can feel and what I can hear and what I can see. So all of these things break that stress response. It cannot be broken with positive thinking.
Yeah, there's 2 other things you were talking about, when you were sharing the story with Will and your advice to him. One of them was also, with the Netflix, and just you used the term sort of bringing energy in. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the energy in stuff could look like? I imagine it's quite personalised. It's going to be very different for different people and at different times.
Yeah, so, working with young men in the football environment, the way I describe it to them is like an equation. We have energy in versus energy out. And when it gets out of balance, what the science and research tells us is that a few things happen. The first thing that happens is your performance goes down. So your decision-making and your ability to execute, that goes down. What goes up is you get more soft tissue injuries, little niggles, a sore back, a sore, a tight hammy. You get more coughs and colds, and your feelings of anxiety go up. And then eventually, when you sit in that out of balance for long enough, feelings of being down and depressed also increase. So it's sort of like it starts small and then it gets bigger and bigger. And so we talk about that energy out is not just football training in a football game. Energy out is all of those stories and worries that we're putting out, because our mind doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. And if you're spending a lot of time in your mind imagining scenarios not going well and imagining things not going to plan and doomsday stories, then you're putting a lot of energy out fighting those stories and sitting in that worry. Interestingly, the AFL brought in rules and regulations around how many hours that players had to be away from the club. So there's very strict. You cannot just have the boys at a club for as long as you want. They have to have so many days off. And this was particularly to combat their increasing, burnout and stress levels. But you get a young footballer who's on the cusp of being selected, and he goes home and he replays every mistake he made at training and replays every comment the coach made, and why didn't I do this, and I need to do that, and he stresses about his body and his fatigue. So he's sitting at home still in that stress response, and that is not good energy in. And so we talk about actually deliberately and purposefully putting good energy in to balance that equation and knowing what good energy is for you. So for some boys, that is absolutely golf and surfing and, fishing. But for other boys, that is, gaming. We do put boundaries around that, but that connection through gaming that they get, it's connecting with family and friends. And so it's them looking at how they can bring that into their week, because when the pressure gets on, you think you need to do less of that. Oh, well, I can't, I've got a big game this week, better not play golf, where in fact, it can actually fill you up. So it's looking for things that bring you joy, really.
And that was the third thing you were saying with the story was that, what are the things that bring you joy? What does that look like? So I guess there's an interrelationship between there.
One of the very well-known players at Richmond, we talked about a lot about what brought you joy when you were a child. What do you remember that? And for him, it was just like riding his bikes through the street. So he started a routine of like getting up and going for a ride along the beach path and going for a swim, and really simple. But hadn't ridden a bike for a long time and just brought him joy. And so it's really taking the time in lockdown when, I can hear people listening to this going, well, I can't play golf and I can't do this. So, you have to be creative and you have to really look at what that is and deliberately put it into your day.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. I know, just a very silly and quick anecdote. I know for myself, I finally bought a surf skate, which is like, it's like a skateboard. I'm nearly 50. I mean, it's ridiculous in one way, but it's been very therapeutic to go across, where I live. There's like a car yard kind of over the roads under the shelter, and, just kind of just do this meditative surf skating, and no one can see me, and it's fantastic.
We have a 11-year-old boy and a 13-year-old daughter, as well as our older two, but I constantly, like last night, for instance, 8:45, 15 minutes before curfew, knowing that there were not going to be many cars out on the road, we took him out on he's got an electric skateboard, and we took him out just on the streets around our house just to feel that sense of freedom. And we were with him, and he had lights, and we're only out for 10 minutes. But it was just, a different feeling in his body to the feeling of just being stuck. And sometimes when we're in that stress response, we try and think our way out of it. Whereas if we change the way we're feeling, those different feelings then change our thoughts. And so it's looking for things that make me feel different. You know, for me at the moment, I'm trying to go into to the beach each day and go into the cold water. I don't even do that in summer, but it feels different for me, and that change in feeling then changes my thoughts.
Yeah, and it's that thing you were saying earlier, the big feels and the small actions. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Something I've been dying to ask you for a long time is around mindfulness and high performance mindfulness. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners would be people that have experienced it and done lots of different courses and all those things. And they'd be thinking about, how does sort of the mindfulness work? You know, I guess there's a spectrum, and there's on one end the sort of the noticing and being aware and just experiencing the what is and paying attention, which is part of your work. And then there's kind of the mindset part of, you know, the high performance mindfulness as well, which is like, well, there's also other things going on, you know, and you're talking about the being in a cycle, which is very tiring, where you're always ruminating and thinking. And I think one of the challenges that people can experience, I know I have, you know, with mindfulness, is like you're aware of your thoughts. You can see your thoughts, they just keep coming up all the time. What do you do? You know, you go and sit in a cave for 15 years and,
I know.
You know,
tough,
reach enlightenment or something. It's not always as practical. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around, you know, sort of the more traditional sort of mindfulness practices and some of the other areas in performance as well.
Yeah, so I learned mindfulness as mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is the most sort of, you know, popular way to learn it, and it's the traditional way to learn it. You know, I learned it from monks and, you know, from people who had learned from monks. I remember learning it. I followed this monk around at a retreat for a whole weekend going, I don't understand. I've got 4 kids. I've got mortgage to pay. And, you know, his only response to me was, you know, you do it now or you do it when you're sick. And I just came out so frustrated how I could make this work in this really modern life where, you know, mindfulness stems out of Buddhism, where we were trying to become enlightened. That was the point of Buddhism. And, you know, that means that non-attachment to anything and non-striving for anything, yet we're trying to employ those same principles in a world where we are attached to things. You know, I'm attached to, you know, where we live and what care we can provide Will and what school my kids go to. And, you know, we are striving to earn enough money to pay for those school fees and to, you know, have experiences where we connect as a family. So it was sort of like this incredible practice, but very difficult to put it into my own life. And then I started working with athletes who were in these high pressure, high expectation environments, you know, motorsport drivers driving at 400k an hour, you know, millimeters from a wall. And I would think, I don't know how I can, because mindfulness-based stress reduction is about becoming present so that you can reduce stress and promote relaxation. And I would go into these environments and think, I'm not sure how I can reduce their stress, and I don't know how I can promote relaxation, but more importantly, I don't actually know if that's going to lead to them performing better. Is that even the state that I want them to be in? But I taught it very formally because I thought that's, you know, who am I to mess with all these years of tradition? And there's a whole body of evidence behind mindfulness. And if you can crack it, oh, you know, that's amazing. If I could get a you know, Formula 2 driver to sit completely non-attached to someone hitting him and what if I hit the wall, and, you know, if I could do that, wow, it would be incredible. But doing that is virtually impossible.
Sounds like the end of the first episode of Star Wars with Luke, you know,
yes,
letting go.
Exactly.
Unlikely.
Yeah, very unlikely. So it was after Will's accident for me, you know, that really made me look at how I was using mindfulness. And, you know, I remember a moment when Will was still in a coma in ICU and I was using mindful walking up and down the corridor. It was literally, if I let my attention go for one moment into the past, you know, why did I let him go to the beach? Or one moment into the future, what is this going to look like? I don't think I could have kept breathing. So I just held my attention on the present moment so fiercely. And I had this moment where I thought to myself, oh, okay, this is mindfulness. Like, I get this. But I could do that because I was literally in a survival situation, whereas if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to stand up. And to do that, to get a student or a corporate executive or a parent to connect to that ability to pay attention like your life depends on it, it's just too hard. And so what spinal cord injury taught me was that, yes, I need to get present, but I also need to be able to pick up my focus and put it on what I can do and put it on, actually take my focus and place it on my strengths and place it on the process and executing the process, which is not part of traditional mindfulness. It's like, just let it be what it is, right? So high performance mindfulness came about from me going from, the hospital into Richmond Football Club. And what is awesome working in football is you can give these boys a tool and then you can watch on the weekend how it plays out. And then you can get their feedback. And you do that week in, week out. So it's real life learning and research in a high pressure, high expectation, environment. And so from there, I just started to learn that, yes, okay, this is how to get present. This is how, a footballer in a stoppage can get present. But this is how he can step into his best. It's like, once I'm present, then I can put my focus on what I can do now to be better than the player next to me. And what I discovered through all of that is that we talk about the statistics of mental health, and 1 in 5 people have a mental health challenge. What I discovered was that 4 in 5 people are really struggling that maybe don't have a mental health issue, but they want to perform better. They want to get to the end of the day and go, I was more productive. I brought more of my strengths to that meeting. I was a better parent. I engaged more with my kids. And when we can get them doing better, then you start to feel better. Whereas so often we're coming at it from, when I feel better, then I'll connect more with my kids, or then I'll show up in that meeting and I'll have my opinion and share my ideas. But let's get you actually learning tools and strategies to bring your best. Then you'll start to get to the end of the day and go, yeah, I did a good job today.
Yeah, that's just, it's mind-blowing what you've just said. Everything from, your own experience, which I think was a profound thing to share, to actually hear that, and then how that's, I guess, the interplay between your own grief and trauma and, realization around so much of what you'd done, and then how you were going to then play that into your life is absolutely extraordinary. And that is an interesting axis, isn't there, between if I feel good, I'll do well, versus if I just do things well, I'll actually start to feel good. Like, it's such an interesting, and sometimes it seems like, I think a lot of when we read, I'm a teacher in wellbeing, and, we read a lot about all the state stuff to function well and feel good and flourish. But actually, there's this other invitation that you're talking about, which is, what are some of how do I show up being, what are the things that I can actually enact that are then going to get me into the right state to be able to deliver and function well as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many corporate wellness programs where we have lunchtime meditation and yoga and go home early and, all of this stuff. And, people are like, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
I need to meet this target and I need to, tick off this to-do list. And I don't have time for the stuff you're telling me that will bring me more balance. So I'm like, okay, let's not strive to do that. Let's strive to, in this moment, be really balanced with your emotion, have your focus in the right place and bring your best to this moment. Then that moment becomes a tick. At Richmond, we draw these little lines on the board. I know this is auditory, so we can't see it, but we draw these little lines like a grid saying our day is broken up into all of these moments. And some moments are going to be a tick, some moments are going to be a cross. But when we get across, we just carry it into the next moment, the next moment. So for a footballer, I miss a goal in the first quarter and I carry the thoughts and feelings of that mistake into the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. And, maybe a coach says something to me at quarter time that puts me back in the right mindset and I go back out in a tick. But we want to be able to know how I can get more ticks in my day. And that is what builds momentum. And that tick is like I asked that question in that meeting rather than sitting silent because I'm tired and I don't want to do this today. I actually put my phone down and I listened to my kid. I didn't necessarily, kick the footy with them or make a cake with them or, spend all day with them, but I got a tick in that moment because I looked them in the eye, I gave them a hug, I put my phone down, tick. And these ticks start to change the way we think and the way we feel. And then we get, as I said, we start to go, that's where we get energy from. That's where we start to feel more energized. And that's where we start to feel like we are, here for a good reason and we're contributing and we're worthy.
Getting back to the lines and the grid and the crosses and the ticks and the footy players, if I was, an athlete and I'd made a cross, the advice would be, and I might be oversimplifying it, but what's something that I can do to get a tick just to straight up, just move on. So I'm not carrying that cross mindset. Yeah.
This is the beauty of me having worked for so many athletes. What it taught me was, we're really sick of being told control what you can control, just focus on, what you can do. It's yeah, we get all that, but tell me how. And I think the difference with high performance mindfulness is it's literally step by step of how to do that. So a footballer would know that, okay, when I make a mistake, the first step that I have to do is I have to accept that it's okay to make a mistake. And I know that acceptance, if I miss that step, then my mind's going to want to keep replaying it over and over again because my mind wants to go, it's a bit like a smoke alarm. Hey, there's smoke here and you haven't got rid of the smoke. I'm going to keep going. So the first step is to really accept that I'm not always going to get it right. I'm going to make mistakes and I can't change that. And I can't change what people think about what I just did. So we have step one is acceptance. And we have along with that step is to take a breath and really change that breath. But we know why we're breathing. I have had that many students come to me who have come from schools who have positive psych programs and they're, now athletes and they have not been able to connect the dots between the positive psych that they're doing in the classroom and what they need to do in the, rowing boat or at the start of a running race because they don't understand why I'm breathing. So it's them really understanding, okay, now I take a breath and I focus on my breath because when I focus on my breath, that turns off the fight and flight system in my body. And if I don't turn that off, I can't shift my focus off the danger. And I'm going to keep staying focused on the danger. And that danger is the mistake I just made. That danger is the cross that I just got. So if I want to get a tick, I have to be able to turn off that response to that cross. And so we go through a step of, we stop, we accept. Now I have to shift my focus. But I have to know where to place my focus, what I spoke about earlier in the podcast. I have to know I have to place my focus on something I can do. And I can't just randomly, if I'm a footballer and I just missed a goal and now I'm going to place my focus on taking a massive mark, well, that's you're more guaranteed to get another cross than a tick from that. That's setting yourself up for another cross. Whereas if you put your focus on, I'm just going to get my running patterns right. I'm just going to get up on my toes and really get light on my feet and focus on my running patterns. Well, you're guaranteed a tick. You're guaranteed, yeah, I did that and I did that well and I'm feeling good. So there's all these steps that the athletes learn and it's different for everyone. What gets you back in your tick is different to what gets me back in my tick. What a small forward does is very different to a key back. And so it's knowing your strengths and what your anchors are to get back over into that tick.
Yeah. And so I guess that's part of, what you've learned with so many different athletes. And, we've just seen the Olympics and we're watching the Paralympics now. And it's, again, in Australia, Melbourne, finals fever is upon us. Are you able to just share any anecdotes or stories, for our listeners around maybe something that surprises you about athletes? I think we often see them as, just they're kind of gifted and born into these, ways of flourishing and they're given sport, or, I was watching a fantastic documentary actually on drumming, and so many of the kids, they just picked up drums at, 3 and 4, and that was just sort of seemed innate. What are some of your observations around, maybe some of the challenges that you've seen really high performing athletes face that kind of make them more human?
Yeah, well, they're scared. They look so brave, and we see them, putting their head over the ball, or, getting up on the Olympics starting line, and we think that they have a quality that we don't have, and that we think that quality is that they don't feel fear. But they absolutely feel fear, and they have just learnt how to take action despite feeling that fear. And their fear is actually no different to our fear. And the bigger the star, whether it's a Dustin Martin or a Kate Campbell in swimming, their fear is the same as the fear of the Year 12 student doing their final exams. It's exactly the same, and it sounds exactly the same in their head, and it feels exactly the same in their body. And we think they're immune to it. That's what makes them so great. But what makes them so great is that they have learnt how to still take action when they feel that fear. Perhaps we don't think that they fear other people's opinions. And I think sometimes we think that, and that's why we think we can write anything about them on social media, and that because they're these elite athletes, that they think that they're above the everyday person, so they don't worry what the everyday person says. So we can just write what we want and say what we want and yell at them over the fence and abuse them. Like, we somehow think that they're above all that. And they're not. They feel the same getting abused by a stranger in the stands as we would feel. And I don't know how along this journey we thought that they were immune to that, because they're not. It feels the same as us getting judged, and it feels the same as us getting criticised. And it makes me so sad that we don't get that athletes have the exact same fear of failure and the exact same fear of judgment and fear of other people's opinions as any of us.
It would be a very powerful thing, wouldn't it, if in the media people were a little bit more aware, of that. It probably wouldn't sell anywhere near as many papers, but
no,
in terms of,
it's like, I look at the people, and I get, sport for a lot of people, they abuse someone and it makes them feel different. And we've talked on this podcast today about taking action to make ourselves feel different. And that's all these people are doing. They're trying to, they don't feel great about themselves, and they release this stuff and it feels a bit different. So they see it as a good thing. I just wish they really knew how that felt for the athlete. Like, I wish they could see all people are the same, and it's not helping them. There's better ways to get, generate that feeling in yourself. And these are young men and young women who are working so hard, the sacrifices they make. You talk about the kid that is innate with the drumming, but to become an elite athlete these days, the work you need to do is extreme. Everyone's talented. Everyone's as in at that level, and everyone's fit, and everyone's worked hard. It's extreme. You get your edge by working harder than someone else. And to then step out and get some of that vile abuse, I don't understand it. And I just don't understand it.
Let's look at the student aspect as well. So you've got, high performing athletes who are looking for an edge and doing everything they possibly can. And then you come across into, the Year 12 space, and then there's probably a greater majority of kids who are really wanting to do well and get the best out of their year. But then there's a bunch of kids who may have different expectations or maybe approaching their Year 12 in a different kind of way. Are you able to talk to us a little bit about what you're learning, and working with school age kids in this space as well?
Well, I'm learning that they're the exact same as athletes. Like they, for an athlete, a lot of their expectation actually comes from themselves. And what I'm learning working with students, and we've engaged Monash University to do a piece of research around our education, our high performance mindfulness education program. And what that showed up is that the pressure comes from the student themselves. I think as parents and as teachers, we think that if we tell them that this is not the be all and end all, there's more to life, there's bigger things in your ATAR, you don't have to worry about this, that they magically stop worrying. They don't. And we also think that because they're not in the high performing, that they don't care about their results. They do. As humans, we care about how we show up. Our number one fear is what other people think of us. And so just because we're not duxing the school does not mean we don't care about what our teachers will think and what our parents will think. And quite often when a student is showing up in a way where they appear that they just don't care, that's a defensive mechanism that they've put in place. If I don't care, then I can't fail. And so fundamentally, it doesn't matter where you sit on the spectrum, we need to understand that students are putting expectations on themselves because they do care, and that care is mainly around, letting people down and worrying about what other people think. So knowing that, we need to respect that, and rather than tell them not to worry and to stop worrying and it's not that important, we actually need to tool them up and give them tools as to what to do with those thoughts and feelings. Now, for some people, that's going to be all around the ATAR. For some, it's going to be around getting drafted. For some, it's going to be around, fulfilling their career to be an entrepreneur when they leave school. Some, it's just getting the interview to get a part-time job that they want. So we need to recognise that there are performance moments in students' life, whether they're striving for a great ATAR or whether they appear to not be. There are important performance moments that are going to continue way past school, and we need to give them the tools for in a performance moment that is important to you, that may not look like, getting the top mark, but it's important to you. And we need to give them those tools to be able to best execute those performance moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's fundamentally learning, isn't it? I mean, that's what they're here. They're here to learn and experience and then go and apply, and that makes a quality education. And if I was a parent now listening, I mean, how do I access this? Where is it available? Is it available more broadly? I mean, obviously you're working with some schools, but how else can parents intersect with your work and learn more?
Yeah, so we have started piloting this program with some schools, because at the moment we are really wanting to make sure that this program is a program that doesn't just tick a box, that it actually changes how the student shows up and how they regulate their emotions and their self-awareness around what they're doing and how they're thinking and how they're feeling, and that we tool them up to carry that into life, into university, job interviews, parenting. And so, we're working with great schools like Brighton Grammar. We ran a pilot with their year 11s and 12s